Story 1. When things fell apart with my parents, I had no choice but to move out. I hit rock bottom with my living situation, crashing on my friends' couches for as long as they could tolerate me. But I knew that could not last. I scoured every roommate app and rental website I could find, hoping for a miracle. That was when I stumbled across a listing that caught my eye. A guy named Mike had a room available in his one-story, three-bedroom house. The rent was $1,200 a month, which seemed reasonable for the area. Mike would be both my landlord and my roommate since he lived there, too. In the ad, he emphasized that he was not home much and that I would often have the house to myself. However, he made sure to include a few rules in big, bold letters. No parties, no big gatherings, no drinking in the living room, and absolutely no going into the basement. Pretty standard stuff, I thought. When I met Mike to check out the place, my first impression was that he was a bit of a loner. He was soft-spoken, seemed awkward, and his voice shook as he explained things. The house itself was decent, though. An open floor plan with the kitchen, living room, and dining room all blending into one big space. The bedroom he was renting out was a good size, fully furnished, and came with a lock. For $1,200 a month, it was a bargain. Mike reiterated the rules during our meeting, especially the part about the basement being off-limits. He said it was just for storage, so I shrugged it off as no big deal. I told him on the spot that I was interested, and after a handshake, I moved in 2 days later. There was no formal lease or contract, just a verbal agreement to pay him cash at the start of each month. Settling in was easy. The bedroom was already furnished, so I just hung a few things on the walls and filled the dresser and closet with my clothes. True to his word, Mike handed me a key to the bedroom door so I could lock it when I was not around. At first, I thought that was a thoughtful touch. Mike never said what he did for work, but he claimed he would rarely be home. That turned out to be untrue. His car was almost always in the driveway when I came back from work. At night, I started noticing strange noises, footsteps, doors opening and closing, and occasional banging sounds. One night, around 2 a.m., I got up to use the bathroom and noticed the basement door was slightly ajar. Curious, I walked over and peeked down the stairs. A dim light was coming from a corner I could not see, and I heard loud banging noises echoing from below. Suddenly, the noises stopped, and Mike appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He stared up at me with a look that sent chills down my spine. He seemed irritated. "What are you doing?" he asked in an almost hostile tone. I stammered, "Just going to the bathroom." "Shut the basement door," he snapped. I did as he said, feeling utterly creeped out. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, my mind racing with questions about what he was doing down there. A week later, I came home to find my bedroom door unlocked. I always locked it before leaving, so I immediately felt uneasy. I checked around, and while nothing seemed to be missing, it was clear someone had gone through my things. My clothes in the dresser were no longer neatly folded, and the closet door was slightly open. Fuming, I went to confront Mike. His car was in the driveway, but he did not answer when I knocked on his door. Later, I heard him come out of his room, so I stopped him in the living room and asked if he had been in my room. He denied it flatly, claiming I had the only key to the door. Before I could press further, he muttered something about being in a hurry and left the house. At this point, I had had enough. I started looking for new places to live. A few days later, when I was sure Mike was out, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to check out the basement. The door had no light switch, so I used my phone's flashlight as I descended the creaky stairs. The basement was small, with a tan carpet poorly fitted to the floor and curling up at the edges. In the middle of the room sat an old, ugly couch. The smell down there was awful, like raw sewage but somehow worse. I noticed a door in the corner and tried to open it, but it was locked. The smell seemed to be coming from behind that door. Feeling uneasy, I decided to leave and hurried back upstairs. That night, I woke up to the sound of floorboards creaking next to my bed. When I opened my eyes, Mike was standing over me, staring. I screamed, but he hissed at me to be quiet and asked if I had been in the basement. "No," I yelled. "How did you get in here?" "I locked the door." He ignored my question, asked again if I had been in the basement, and then turned and left the room. Before he walked out, he told me, "I think you should find somewhere else to live." I started packing immediately. I knocked on his door to demand some of my rent back, and a moment later, he opened the door just enough to stick his arm out, holding a small stack of cash. It was only $400, but I grabbed it and left without saying a word. That night, I slept in my car. The next day, I swallowed my pride and went back to my parents' house. Surprisingly, they welcomed me back without hesitation. A month later, I found a new place, and things with my parents are better now. If you are ever thinking about moving in with someone you found online, be careful. Always trust your gut and pay attention to the red flags. Story 2. My junior year of college was supposed to be a fresh start, new classes, new opportunities, and for the first time, living off campus. I moved into a student apartment building, and the school paired me with a roommate, a guy named Mike. At first, Mike seemed like your average, friendly college student. He was polite, always smiling, and made small talk that put me at ease. But as the days turned into weeks, I started noticing things about him, odd quirks that made me feel uneasy. Mike had this habit of lingering in my room. He would wander in, ask overly personal questions, and casually poke around my stuff like we had been best friends for years. At first, I thought it was just harmless curiosity, but the longer it went on, the more uncomfortable it made me. I started keeping my door closed more often, hoping he'd get the hint. Then came the noises. Late at night, I would hear muffled sounds coming from Mike's room. It was mostly whispering, mixed with strange, shuffling noises. I tried to brush it off as him talking on the phone or watching something on TV, but deep down, it did not sit right with me. One sleepless night, the noises were louder than usual. Curiosity got the better of me, so I tiptoed down the hall and pressed my ear against Mike's door. What I heard was bizarre. He was whispering to himself, his voice low and intense. Just as suddenly as the whispers started, they stopped. Then, clear as day, I heard my name, Tom. My heart skipped a beat. Did he know I was outside his door? I backed away slowly and practically ran back to my room, crawling into bed and pulling the covers over me like a scared little kid. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell was going on. The next day, I could not stop thinking about what I had heard. And the more I dwelled on it, the weirder Mike seemed. He started giving me these strange looks, and his movements became almost sneaky, like he was up to something. It was subtle, but I noticed it. A few nights later, I woke up to the sound of whispering. This time, it was not coming from Mike's room. It was coming from the hallway, right outside my door. I froze, my heart racing, and listened closely. It was Mike's voice. I got up quietly and pressed my ear to the door. The whispering stopped, and then I heard it again. Tom? This time, I answered. Yeah? You good? I called out. No response. Just the sound of footsteps retreating down the hallway. My skin crawled. The next night, I woke up again, but this time it was the sound of my bedroom door closing that startled me awake. I sat up and heard Mike's footsteps heading back down the hall. That was it. I had to confront him. The next morning, I asked him straight up if he had a history of sleepwalking or any kind of sleep disorder. At first, he looked caught off guard, like he did not know how to answer. Then he nodded and said, "Yeah, sometimes I sleepwalk." I did not believe him. Something about his tone and his hesitation made it clear he was lying. I knew I needed to get to the bottom of this. So, when Mike left the apartment one afternoon, I decided to search his room. I felt guilty for invading his privacy, but I was desperate for answers. I rifled through his drawers, his closet, anywhere I thought I might find a clue. Just as I was about to give up, I found a small, hidden drawer at the back of his closet. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. Inside was a stack of photographs, dozens of them, and they were all of me. Most of the photos were of me sleeping. Some were close-ups of my face, so detailed that you could see the individual pores on my skin. Mixed in with the photos of me was another guy, someone about our age who I did not recognize. My head was spinning. Mike had been sneaking into my room, taking pictures of me while I slept. He had been violating my privacy in the most disturbing way imaginable. I took pictures of the drawer's contents with my phone and grabbed a handful of the photos as evidence. I packed a bag, determined to get out of there as quickly as possible. The next day, I went straight to the student housing office, showed them the photos, and explained everything. They assured me they would handle it and found me a new place to live with a different roommate. I never saw or spoke to Mike again. Even now, years later, I cannot shake the memory of those photos or the sound of him whispering my name in the dark. I never found out who the other guy in the photos was. Maybe he was Mike's old roommate. Maybe he figured it out too. All I know is that I got out before something worse could happen. If there is one thing I learned, it is this. Trust your gut, and if something feels off, it probably is. Story 3. When I was 23, I had to move out of state for work. It was a big change, and I was nervous, but I figured it was the right move for my career. Thankfully, I still work with the same company today, but now I am back in my hometown, working at the local office. At that time, though, I needed a place to live that would not break the bank. So, I did what most people do. I posted on every platform I could think of: Facebook, Craigslist, Twitter, even my neighborhood subreddit, looking for a roommate. A guy named Rob reached out to me on Facebook, saying he had a room available in his house. I checked out his profile pictures to see if he looked somewhat normal. He did. I had no problem rooming with the guy as long as he seemed okay, though my parents were very against it. Rob and I set up a FaceTime call where he gave me a virtual tour of the house. It was a modest place in town, just a 10-minute drive from my new office. He told me he owned the house outright, which I thought was a little surprising for someone his age, but he seemed nice and laid back. His price was fair, and his house rules were simple. He even said I could move in right away, which was perfect for my timeline. A week later, I had everything packed and drove down. Rob met me out front, handed me a key, and helped me carry in my heavier bags. He was friendly enough, but I immediately noticed he was pretty short, eye level with me. He showed me my room, which was already furnished. He said his last roommate, a friend of his, had recently moved out. I replaced the bed sheets and pillows with my own, of course, but otherwise, I spent the rest of the day settling in. Rob seemed eager to get to know me, but I did not feel like he was being overly friendly yet. The next day was Sunday, and Rob offered to drive me around town to show me the area. I did not really want to, but I figured it would be a good way to start off on the right foot. He showed me the best places to shop, eat, and hang out. Then he suggested we grab lunch. I was not hungry and politely declined, but he kept pushing, suggesting drinks instead. I told him I do not drink on work nights, but he kept saying, "Just a couple, come on." I shut that down, still being polite, and he eventually gave up, though he got really quiet after that, almost sulking. I was a little uncomfortable, but I brushed it off. Things took a turn that week. A few days in, I got home and did some laundry. While loading the washing machine, I noticed that my hamper looked off. The clothes were not how I left them. As I went through everything, I realized one of my underwear was missing. I searched my room 5 times, top to bottom. It was gone. A terrible thought crossed my mind. What if Rob? But I shook it off. I could not confront him without proof, and maybe it was just misplaced. Still, the idea of him going through my stuff made me uneasy. That weekend, I went to the hardware store and bought a lockable doorknob. While Rob was out, I swapped out the doorknob on my bedroom door. I figured I would tell him later. But that night, at 1:30 a.m., I woke up to banging on my door. It was Rob, and he sounded angry. He kept calling my name. I stayed quiet, pretending to be asleep, too scared to open the door. The next morning, I got text from him saying we needed to talk. When I asked if it was about the doorknob, he said yes. I apologized and explained that, as a woman, I just felt safer with a lock. He was calmer after that, but still insisted I take it off. I reluctantly agreed, though it made me question how he knew I had changed it. The next part of this story is where it all spiraled. A girl knocked on the door one day while Rob was out. She was about my age and asked if I was living there. When I said yes, she told me I needed to get out immediately. She explained that Rob had multiple restraining orders against him from different women and was known to be a dangerous stalker. I was shocked and terrified. She said she had seen me moving in and waited until he was gone to warn me. I thanked her, took her number, and started looking for a new place right away. I found a studio apartment across town, a bit more expensive but available immediately. I started packing and texted Rob, saying I had to move out due to a family emergency. He seemed suspicious, but said he would return my money the next day. That night, though, I woke up to see him sitting at the foot of my bed. I screamed, and he clamped his hand over my mouth, telling me to be quiet. He said, "Do not listen to what they say. I am not like that." I begged him to leave, but he started caressing my leg, saying he did not mean to scare me. I bolted for the door, grabbed my phone, and ran outside. I called the police and hid in the bushes until they arrived. The police made Rob come out and explain himself. While they stayed, I packed up the rest of my things. I also made sure he Venmo'd me the money he owed. One of the officers pulled me aside to tell me that Rob had been arrested before for incidents with women, but there was no hard evidence this time, so it was just my word against his. I left and stayed in a hotel that night, moving into my new apartment the next day. Since then, I have made a rule for myself. I will never live with a man who is not a boyfriend or husband. It is just not worth the risk.